Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nurfika. We are from Group 14. Our group chose inflation as our research topic. So, what is inflation? Inflation is defined as an increase in the price of goods and services purchased by the households. The rate of change of those prices is used to calculate it. Price usually rise over time, but they can also decline. The Consumer Price Index, or CPI, which measures the percentage change in the price of a basket of goods and services consumed by the households, is the most well-known indicator of inflation. To fulfill our curiosity, the objective of this research paper is to find the relationship between minimum wage, money supply, government spending, real exchange rate, and unemployment on inflation. In this paper, inflation is the dependent variable. We have found several explanatory variables that inflation corresponds to, which are minimum wage, exchange rate, money supply, unemployment, and government spending.
Now let's move on to first explanatory variable, which is minimum wage, or the indicator used in this observation is mean wage, where it has a positive relationship to inflation, where the increase in minimum wage will encourage inflation. And the second one is exchange rate, where a low exchange rate will lead to inflation, therefore it has an inverse relationship. And the indicator used in this observation is ER. And the third one is money supply, where the indicator used is M2. So money supply has a positive relationship to inflation, where the increase in money supply shows significant impact on inflation rate. And the fourth one is unemployment rate, where unemployment rate has an inverse relationship to inflation, and the indicator used in this observation is UNM. And the last observation is on government spending, demand pull inflation, where it has a positive relationship to inflation, where if government spend more, the prices will go up. So the indicator used for this is G.
We have extracted data from Eurostat, World Bank, Index Mundi, and macrotrends.net. From more than 60 countries, we have filtered 33 countries or observations with complete dataset.
From the equation, we can interpret our findings, which is, in the first place, we have eliminated one of our explanatory variable, which is ER, or exchange rate, because we cannot get the value that we want to run the Ramsey reset test. So after eliminate the exchange rate, we get the value that we want. And we can see here, out of the 4 remaining explanatory variable, only government expenditure had the positive relationship with the inflation rate, and the other 3, which is money supply, minimum wage, and unemployment rate, has a negative relationship with the inflation rate.
After finish the regression mode, we tested for specification error by Ramsey reset test. In hypothesis analysis, we accept new hypothesis because the p-value is 0.2428 is more than the critical value 0.05. This shows that there is no specification error. Next, we use Durbin-Watson test to test whether the regression equation has serial correlation. As the test, it lies in the except H0 region. This means that p-value is 0, there is no first-order serial correlation. We can also see the p-value is larger than the level of significance, so there is no autocorrelation. But it is for first-order serial correlation only.
So in the heteroscedasticity test, our null hypothesis is all errors are homoscedastic, and our alternative hypothesis is all errors are heteroscedastic. After we run the test, we got the level of significance is 0.05, and the critical value is 23.685. So the tested value is much higher than the critical value. It means that there is an error occur in the heteroscedastic. Therefore, we reject null hypothesis. Because there is error in the heteroscedasticity, this new test was done as correction to the heteroscedasticity. The R squared for government expenditure is 0.473499, which is far from 0.8. So this value indicates that there is no multicollinearity between our first explanatory variable. For the money supply, M2, the R squared is 0.526164, which is also much smaller than 0.8. So we conclude in this test that there is also no multicollinearity in the second variable. For the third variable, that is minimum wage, the R squared for minimum wage is 0.527689, also much smaller than 0.8. So we can conclude that there is no multicollinearity in the third variable. For our fourth variable, the R squared shown that from the test is 0.193956, also much smaller than 0.8. So from the four tests that we conclude, there is no multicollinearity in our four variables because the relationship between the R squared is very far from 0.8. Based on the final model, we have found the relationship as in the model. For government expenditure, there is positive relationship, and for the money supply, there is negative relationship, and for minimum wage, there is also negative relationship, and lastly, for the unemployment rate, there is also negative relationship.
Under the test for individual significance, first we have government expenditure, in which p-value is larger than the level of significance, which is 0.09 was larger than 0.05. On the other hand, the test statistic value was also smaller than the critical value. Therefore, we reject the HO. Next, for the money supply, the test statistic value is smaller than the critical value. Therefore, we accept the HA. As for minimum wage, the T value is smaller than the critical value. Therefore, we accept the HA. Last but not least, for the unemployment rate, the test statistic value is smaller than the critical value. Therefore, we also reject the HO. Finally, as a result for the test on overall significance, the rejection area is to the right of the critical value of N on F distribution. The test statistic value is more than the critical value, so we decide to reject the HO. Therefore, there is an overall significance of the model.
For the conclusion, the final model that we get from the test is varied. For the hypothesis variable of minimum wage is positive, but the result is otherwise negative. For the second variable, which is the eccentricity, we do not run the test because we do not have enough data to run the test. Then for the third variable, which is money supply, the hypothesis is positive relationship, but the result that we get from the test shown negative. For the fourth variable, which is unemployment rate, the hypothesis that we put is negative relationship, which is in the same, we got the same from the test, also negative relationship. Lastly, the variable is government spending, that is demand per inflation. The hypothesis of the variable that we put is positive, and the result is also positive.